drifted alarmingly in the betting was, Fencel in the morning continued to drift. It was late on the exchanges to lose. It was something you'd see in a Dick Francis novel, Charles Burns.
The ground is soft.
It's heavy.
Soft on times.
It's heavy.
Okay.
Hello, and a very warm welcome. Yes, this is a Bar Stewards Inquiry Sermon Special. Yes, this is a special shirt where we've certainly got some interesting banter and chat from gambles, coups, plots, bankruptcies, you name it, people shooting themselves. This show's got the lot, and its ratings passed. A lot of fun, a lot of fascinating tales that we're going to bring to you. Some you'll have heard, no doubt. Some I'm pretty sure you won't have. So stay tuned. Welcome, John and Chris, to the show.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Let's get this show on the road. Now, Chris, off air, we've already had a little chat about this, and I'd like you to kick the show off with this one. This was a gamble from back in the day, really, but not in the too distant past. What can you tell us about one of the gambles on this show tonight?
When you do these kind of shows, people expect to hear the obvious ones that feature in all the books. I've tried to unearth a few that I remember that a lot of listeners might not be aware of, but nevertheless kind of sum up why we love this sport. And the first one I'm going to pick is from 2003. I'm sure people will be on and saying, hey, it was 2004, you're wrong. But I remember it was 2003, and it was a horse called Spandau. Right, so this was a horse that landed what was alleged to be a huge coup in a Mickey Mouse race, I think at Newton Abbot. So you can see the level of research we do here. I can't even remember where it was.
It was Newton Abbot, 12th of August 2003, ridden by Barney Curley, of all people.
Oh, God.
There you go. And the backstory behind this horse seemed to be that the horse on paper seemed to have little or no ability. And when it sort of won, as the market suggested it would, it transpired that the horse was sourced by one Henry Oliver. Now, Henry Oliver is no longer with us, but sort of older listeners might remember him as the partner of Sally Oliver, who you might remember had that really good hurdler called, I think it was Anoch. And Anoch that won, I think, the Sandyman hurdle at Aintree. And, they were synonymous with landing a few really, really good touches, etc. And my old friend Roger Ingram used to know those guys really well. The story is that Henry Oliver sourced this horse from New Zealand, and he was one of the first people in the UK to identify the potential of New Zealand horses. I think David Barron was also quite tip of the spear in that sort of stuff. And he used to go over a couple of times a year and source these horses. They had this horse, and it ran, I think, a handful of times for Owen O'Neill, who was, I think he was a permit holder based at Cheltenham, and it didn't particularly acquit itself with glory. And then the horse, I think, moved to John Tuck, again, who is no longer training, but John Tuck was a pretty smart operator, and they had it bang off in this race. You said Canary Road. I remember it was Seamus Durack. Was it definitely Canary?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, that's it. Seamus Durack rode the stable companion.
He did. Indian Star in the race.
Which didn't run as well as the winner, did it? Funnily enough. And they meant to have had it bang off there. So there was a huge scream up, etc. And coincidentally, the following week after that race, I found myself in Tony Carroll's yard. Was the connection with David Wintle. And young Henry Oliver, who's now a trainer, was there riding some work. I asked him about this. I said, did you have lumps on, etc., as the papers say? And I've never seen a man go redder than he did. If you can imagine a traffic light with high blood pressure, like Alan Brazil's head, this guy just went so, and he just did not want to answer that question. I always remember that gamble, but you won't read it in any of the books, and I dare say very few people outside of that circle of people will remember it. But that, to me, encapsulates just what national hunt racing and punting's about. You've got a horse with no ability in training with a yard that isn't particularly fashionable but knew the time of day, and they had it spark off. And I think they got paid. I think there was a bowler scream up afterwards, but I think once all the dust has settled, the inquiry sort of concluded and they got paid, and they found there was nothing untoward. So Spandau, for me, is probably the one that encapsulates national hunt racing for me.
Yeah, interesting as well, Chris. They obviously weren't that bothered at being £6 out of the handicap either.
No. They had 600 stone in hand, didn't they?
Who cares? We've got this today. We've got this.
And I loved Henry Oliver's comment. As I remember, I think I'm looking at it now, he said, "Oh, a bit on, not much, but your form was there for all to see." I thought, no, it fucking wasn't. It's basically saying, if you look at this one piece of form in isolation, then it had half a chance, which is what they all say. They said, well, it was all in there in the form book, had a great chance. Yeah, of course it did. So, crafty fella, Henry Oliver, and I think he passed away, and I think he had a conviction actually for cattle rustling as well, which I think is still an offence. But he did a bit of time for cattle rustling. He's a really crafty firm then. They knew what they were doing.
Corking start, as you can see. A nice bit of life experience and a bit of research into these things. And John, I'm going to come to you. Could you start us with an obvious one, really? And this is one, because it's the early part of the show, so like it'll get better as we go along. Flockton Grey. Obviously, this was the famous one.
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of our older audience will remember Flockton Grey rather well. It was a very well publicised scandal, but some of our younger audience might not know too much about this.
No, Flockton Grey was at the centre of one of the biggest betting scandals ever to hit British racing, in all fairness. The affair is probably best known for a corrupt trainer and owner using a ringer to run in place of another horse. Because of the use of the ringer, Flockton Grey didn't actually run in the race for which he became most famous.
Yeah.
The horse himself was a very plain gelding. He was a grey, and there's a bit more about this fact that he was a grey later on when they were trying to say where he'd been kept and everything, because my dear friend Mel Britton almost roped into this because they were saying Mel had bought it because he was only buying grey horses at the time when he was setting himself up as a trainer. Mel basically told the investigators to fuck off. It was nothing to do with him.
Yeah.
Because he'd never laid eyes on the horse. Anyway, he was picked up for less than £1,000 as a foal. I think he fetched just under 2 as a yearling. And he was bought by a bloke called Ken Richardson, who was an absolute fucking wrong 'un.
Chris loves a wrong 'un.
Oh, yes. I don't like the right ones, but I love the wrong ones. Yeah.
Richardson was one of these gobshit punters. And Mel told me this. He had this method of testing you out. What he used to do, he used to ask you to go and put him 100 on one. And he'd give you the bundle with 120 in. And if you brought him the 20 back, he assessed you as being all right.
That's
Right.
the other way around then. When normally,
Yeah.
if you go to a bookmaker after a large win, especially back in the day, especially in the north, they tried to pay you in Scottish. Even though you put 500 quid in their satchel full of nice, fresh, clean £20 sterling, you'd get a load of Scottish 20s and 50s back, which,
Yeah.
and then you'd usually be £20 short if you didn't count it. But that's a nice change, John.
He tried it with Mel, and Mel had put him this 100 on and found that there was an extra 20. I mean, as you can imagine, Melvin being a multi, went back absolutely fucking fuming because he realised what was going on. And he said, here's your extra 20. He said, shove it up your ass.
Yeah.
Stephen Wiles, who was down as the trainer, hadn't trained the winner in 2 years.
Yeah.
Obviously, in what looked a very bad 2-year-old race early season. It was the 29th of March 1982 at Leicester. So just probably the Monday after the Lincoln, something like that. A 2-year-old running for a trainer and had a winner for 2 years, it's put in at 10-1. Well, of course, it's not Flockton Grey. It was actually a bloody 3-year-old called Good Hand, had formerly been owned by Richardson. According to the official weight for age at the time, Good Hand had been actually declared as the runner in that race. He'd have been carrying 47 pounds more than a 2-year-old. And where they slipped up a bit, they had wonderful up-and-coming young jockey Kevin Darley on it. And they'd gone for Kevin Darley because when all the lads were fixing races in the north, your Dandies and your Tony Iveses and your Johnny Seagraves, they all used to stop theirs because they knew Darley was trying, and they just backed Darley.
Yeah, that was the way forward, wasn't it?
Yeah, they knew theirs wasn't winning, so all they had to do was back Darley. Because Kevin Darley thinking, this is so much, he kicks on 2 out and he goes and wins 20 lengths. Well, anything within a 5 furlong 2-year-old race by 20 lengths backed off the board
may raise eyebrows.
They get a bit suspicious, aren't they?
It's sort of Royal Ascot stuff, isn't it?
Anyway, the records of the racecourse Ret disclose that the winner had a conspicuous scar on its foreleg. Investigators traced Flockton Grey to one of Wild's yards, determining his identity by blood tests, but found no scar. The scar had vanished. So, the help of some old photos as well, when this good hand had not had a scar and then had a scar when it had appeared in races, they established the fact that it was good hand and not Flockton Grey that had run. Unsurprisingly, jockey Kevin Darley was exonerated of any knowledge of the switch, but if they'd had the sense to tell him, and he'd only won a neck or so, or a half a length, then they'd probably got away with it. And apparently Richardson had the thick end of 20 grand on it with his betting partner. He looked to clear about 200k. He got warned off for 25 years. Wild's got a similar ban. Richardson later popped up as chairman of Bridlington Town Football Club. And then he brought into Doncaster Rovers. Bridlington Town went bankrupt under his stewardship, with the fans accusing Richardson of gross financial mismanagement. And similar accusations were made while he was at Doncaster. He was a hell of a bloke.
Yeah, Rongan. Chris likes these.
Yeah, I
ones.
do. No, I like him. He's private trainer. We're going to have him in us. Yeah, it's just...
Yeah, some of the famous case of Flockton Grey up, an older horse running as a ringer. It was confirmed, obviously, by the BHA. Oh, well, if they were called the Jockey Club back then, not the BHA.
Yeah.
And the Jockey Club banned the trainer and Richardson. Richardson was actually got a 9-month suspended jail sentence, John. But the thing is, right, and I've said this before on shows, guys, right? If you walked into a post office, armed or not, and robbed it,
Yeah,
right,
you do instead.
you do time, even if you've only nicked £2,000 out at till or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And a few green shield stamps. These guys obviously worked out you could come into racing.
It's proper theft, isn't it?
Yeah, and you could just absolutely just... Things are sort of tightening up these days to a degree. They're still not bomb-proof, as we'll find out later in the show. Flockton Grey, a great case. And for those of you younger listeners, if you haven't read up on this or listened to anything on this, I suggest you do. It showed what racing could be about back in the day. Right, back to you, Chris. I'm swinging it right back round to you, mate.
This is sort of not one particular instance, but this is a horse that is very much a friend of the show, and it is sort of owned in various guises by a good friend of ours who has a number of horses with Gary Moore. And this is a horse called Gossiping. And this is from more recent times. And this is a horse that I think they got from Charlie Appleby originally. We know a lot of those horses that come from Appleby, people think they're picking them up cheap. It's got a lot of ability, but often that they tend to have their brains blown out, don't they? So you're taking a chance. But this is one of those rare occasions when they got a bargain. Gossiping was a prolific winner, and it's one of those rare animals that when the cash is applied, 9 times out of 10, this used to deliver. The first of these was on the 10th of January, and I'm thinking it's 2017. It was at Wolverhampton. Ridden by no one less than Shane Kelly. Lovely pair of hands is Shane. And I think overnight, due to the fact it had zero form, I think it was sort of priced up by Denise and friends at 14-1. And that lasted 30 seconds. But I think throughout the whole day, they had sort of prices down from sort of 10-1. And even on the track, they backed it from 4s into 5-2. And I'm looking here at the comments in running. And it was held up, headway 2 out, led a furlong out and ridden out. Shane Kelly would do more activity climbing the stairs to bed than he did that night. I remember it. It was absolutely motionless. Gary Moore said that in order to explain the improvement in form, he said that the gelding settled better off a stronger pace and also benefited from the drop in class, which was a masterpiece in understatement. And that sort of was the first time they backed it and it won numerous times after that. And what they used to do from memory is to run it in Gary Moore's colours, run it in a partnership's colours, all to sort of obfuscate and try and give the illusion that the horse had sort of been sold. But what a marvellous gambling tool that was. And again, you won't see that in any of the gambling books, but that was a real money spinner for those who knew about that horse.
Just to add some more information to gossiping.
Yep.
If you remember that famous evening, Wolverhampton, Gary Moore also ran another one in the race called Broughton's Fancy, ridden by Timmy Murphy. Obviously, Gossiping was a horse they were always worried about settling, getting it to settle and make sure it settles. Timmy's job in that race, I believe anyway, I've not had this confirmed officially, but if you watch the video back, they went off a good lick to start with, but Timmy was sort of sat in about third place.
Yeah.
But then Timmy said, no, we're not having none of this anchoring down the back straight.
Yeah, I remember now, you say.
And he forced the pace on to go a little bit quicker while Gossiping was sat in a lovely 5th or 6th place position. And Timmy's sending Mick Appleby's Barmy in front, a few others, Bazata, John Ryans, I think, from memory. Old Gossiping come blasting through. Didn't have to move, like you say. They got it off of the mark of 65, left Charlie Appleby's off 82. Do you know what a buy this was?
It was.
11,500 guineas. I think 13,000 was mentioned as the payment with the VAT. Gossamer was the mother.
Yeah.
It was by Jabbar. This is blue blood stuff, and certainly blue blood relatives. I thought it's one of the buys of, I don't know, recent times. I do know Ashley and do have interaction with Ashley. And
yeah, I do, yeah.
This was quite a special horse because as long as he had the right race set up, the horse would do the business, no problem. You can see it was a win machine. Now, the thing with this horse is he actually wanted soft ground, but it never seemed to have the opportunity. Every time they sort of had it ready for a turf race on soft ground, never turned up soft.
No.
They got it in the 90s, I think, in the end. I think
they did. And why I love this horse, Lee, is this is the sort of horse that every ordinary punter, wannabe owner, like, to a lesser extent you and John, but people like me, 4 or 5 fellas getting together, throwing 2 or 3 grand in, that's the sort of horse you dream of buying. You realistically don't dream of winning sort of Saturday races, but you want a gambling tool that when the money's down, it does the business. And that's the sort of horse you dream of buying, a cheap, well-bred horse that's reliable. And Gossiping was just almost like clockwork, wasn't it?
Yeah. Speaking to Ashley about the horse, he said this was a horse that worked on its own, had its own routine, was sort of kept away from prying eyes on the gallops.
No shit.
Worked in the dark.
Minus helmets for non-work riders, yeah.
His personal quotes on the day when they fancied it at Wolverhampton, he said, yeah, they were a bit disappointed because it was apparently 12-1 overnight.
That's right, yeah.
It was backed into 4-1 overnight. And I think the South Coast mob all sat there going in dismay at seeing like 4s and thinking, oh, no. And then apparently it went down to 2s at one point later that morning. In the days of the Betfair old push out.
Yeah.
Push it back out, make it look like it's not off. I think they had some nice prices on that, to be honest.
Yes, yeah, I think they did. And it was just I only listen, people can moan and say, oh, look, the game's bent, it's horrible to see, etc., etc. But if you want to get a horse in a syndicate and you have any aspirations to sort of land a touch, that's the sort of horse you dream of picking up. Not hugely expensive, but reliable and give you a lot of fun. And it gave them a huge amount of fun. And as you say, I think it ended in the 90s, and they were running in sort of Saturday races. Did it win round Chester or somewhere?
Yeah.
Massive price.
Yeah, that's another story, right? He went to Chester that day, did Ashley, when it won there. They'd all had the bet, but they were on bog. In the days of where you could get bog, Ashley went to Chester, no phone signals. Chester blocks phone signals because they're absolute twats with things like that. And what happened was, the horse went off at 8-1 SP, and they were all thinking, well, we'll get like 4s or something. Now at 8-1 bog, it went off like 14 on the machine. He said he wished he'd stayed at home, but they all had it off then as well. But it was another thing that these gambles that take place, and the South Coast mob, by the way, I think are one of the best in the game. Would you agree with that, Chris?
Yeah, I would. You can obviously list numerous trainers that are brilliant at landing a touch, but Gary Moore does it consistently, year after year after year, and somehow he manages to get prices that don't apply to certain other yards that you associate with being a gambling stable. They find a way of getting a price. If I won the lottery and wanted to have a few horses, Gary Moore, I think, would be the sort of yard I'd be putting a horse with, because they know what they're doing and they seem to be able to get the prices. And if you like Plumpton or Fumpwell, even better, because they love a run around there. So, yeah, I've got a lot of time for that yard, actually. Good outfit.
Indeed. Right, John. Cry for the Clown.
Oh, wow. Brilliant.
Right.
Right, he won on debut. That's all I can see in
Yeah.
1986 at Ripon. So come on, tell
Yes.
us the story about this.
Well, what it was, unbeknownst to me, I was a little bit involved in this.
Really? Wow.
Although I didn't realise it at the time. Alan Bailey, who trained it, I'd kind of got to know him through the fact that I started this connection with Geoffrey Ragsyard. His travelling head lad Stuart was courting Alan Bailey's daughter. As a result, I always paid fairly close attention to Alan Bailey's runners. And I was at Ripon this day, and pretty certain it was the first race of the day. And I seen this horse in the pre-parade ring, and unsurprisingly, it stood out actually. It looked like a robin against a load of sparrows. I went over to see my mate, Rusty Spower, who was the blacksmith for the paddock, because he knew Alan Bailey and he always used to get there early. I thought, I'll ask him about this bloody horse. So I said, what's this one of Alan Bailey? Do you know what about it? He said, well, he's coming up there with the saddle. He said, I was going to help him to saddle it. He said, but I can't be fucking bothered. He said, go give him a hand. I said, I'm filling in for Rusty. Alan. He said, all right, no problem. We went to the saddling boxes. I said, looks all right, this. I said, your missus owns it. He just shook his head. Funny thing about his missus at the time, she had the colours that are now somewhat more famous because they're the colours of Godolphin. They sold the all blue.
Wow. Never knew that.
Yeah, Mrs. Bailey's colours at that time were the all blue. But that day they brought the wrong colours, believe it or not.
Yeah, I've had that before.
I think running black with white spots or something. It was one of the other owners anyway, but it was running in Mrs. Bailey's name. I said, oh, didn't she? He said, no. He was a little bit evasive about it. So, me being a bit green around the gills at that time, I was only 19, just sort of getting involved. I said, well, what is it then? He said, oh, it doesn't matter that. He said, don't worry about it. He said, we just finished tightening everything up and that. And he said, well, have you backed it? I said, no. He said, well, you better fuck off and back it.
Those are his exact words.
So I said, okay, so Alan, yeah, well. I said, winning a cellar with this. I said, be ashamed to lose it. He said, we won't fucking lose this.
Oh my God. So they were running in a cellar just knowing full well they would win head in chest.
I goes round to Brokey's at Ripon and there was a tiny bit of 20s available. I had about 160 quid on me in cash. So I thought, well, fuck, I like the look of this bloody horse. So I pretty much unloaded on it. I think I left myself a bit of petrol money. And, oh my God, fathers, it come crashing down. I think went off 4-1 favourite.
Did.
Peter Bloomfield rode it. Now, for me, there was 2 job jockeys at the time attached to yards that didn't make mistakes and nobody clocked onto them. There was Peter Bloomfield at Alan Bailey's and Paul Leach at Martin Pipes. And they were both fucking deadly when the money was down. Never had a worry with either jockey, in my experience. But they were mustard. Anyway, this thing won about 6 lengths. I was cock-a-hoop in 19. I thought, oh, fucking easy game, this.
Yeah, fortune.
I goes out to see him on the saddle and that. I said, oh, thanks very much, Alan. And auction was starting up. I said, it'll probably fetch you a few quid, this man. He said, it doesn't matter. He said, he's buying it back in. He nodded over to the other side at Winner's Enclosure. And there's this little pot-bellied fucker with a mullet. And it was Terry Ramsden, although I didn't know at the time. I forget how much it went for, but they broke the record by about 12 grand for a horse getting bought in after a cellar at Ripon.
Terry wouldn't be bothered, would he?
I wouldn't have been asked because he cleared the fucking lot. It turned out it was his horse all along, but he obviously didn't want his name in race card because he chalked it up about 5-1. I mean, it went on. I think it ran placed in an Earl of Sefton. It was that good. A 6 furlong Ripon cellar, you weren't even bothered about the draw. As long as it wasn't drawn off the track, you had nothing to worry about. It's absolutely punched up.
Fantastic, John. Fantastic memories.
I mean, Terry Ramsden was a fucking idiot. If he'd stuck to punting when his 2 main men, Alan Bailey and Mick Ryan, had him ready, he'd have probably got banned from Ladbrokes instead of ended up owning them.
I think that was the thing, though. I think Terry, you could say, used like a gambling problem, but I think the bloke just loved the adrenaline and just massive bets.
He wanted the buzz all the time.
Massive bets all the time, yeah. Whether that was Saturday TV racing or anything. Even one of his runners that would got half a chance, he'd still have lot on.
Yeah.
And yeah, roll to cock. Again, somebody else that probably could have made better. But great story that. I've not heard that one before. Right, we move on. I will talk about one now that's a more obvious one. I've got to mention it because it defined times. The Yellow Sam
Yes.
gamble, which obviously lots of people have read about at Bellewstown, 26th of June 1975. 20 to 1 into 2 to 1. Barney Curley announced himself as someone that knows how to do this sort of thing. And there's another Barney Curley story coming later in the show. But this was one where Barney went round assembling teams of punters to go into betting offices with 5 punts, 10 punt stakes on a horse called Yellow Sam in the offices, keep it quiet to a degree. And then strategically, he got a man blocking the phone box at Bellewstown Racecourse to stop the info getting to the track.
When the mother on the deathbed or something said,
Yeah, it was Curley said after the race, Benny O'Hanlon, who he had asked to do the task, got talking to some non-existent hospital in nearby Drogheda, where he had an aunt who was dying. It was all total nonsense, but he carried it off brilliantly as people were busting to use the phone box, and this was the way of doing it. And the funny thing was, Curley on the day was on the opposite side of the track. He was down the back straight watching it because he didn't want to appear on the racetrack for fear of people cottoning on. So he watched the race from the bushes down the back. I absolutely love it. This is 1975. They managed to get a total 15,300 with an SP of 20 to 1, winning a total of £306,000, which is the equivalent inflation-wise of £2 million today. Sadly for Yellow Sam, he never won again and was killed in a fall subsequently. The interesting thing was the jockey, Michael Furlong, who rode it, was completely unaware of the gamble. He didn't know, wasn't even told, until he read about it in the Sporting Life the next day. It made me feel proud, he said, partly because they picked me as the jockey to do the job. Do you know what? That's why it's more smart, because if you tell a jockey that the world's on this one, the pressure then, it's like taking a penalty at World Cup.
well, yeah, worst case scenario, they're nerved up to fuck, aren't they?
Like, oh, fucking hell, they've backed this to win an absolute fortune. What happens if I get on wrong stride? Incredible. Fantastic story. An obvious one, which a lot of you will have heard, and if you haven't, now you have. But that was the start of Barney Curley, really, and future Coups down the line. Chris, I'm coming back to you. Where are you thinking of going for your next gamble?
I want to sort of go slightly off piste here. So obviously, you focused on specific horses. I want to try and hark back to a time when I first got into the sport and reference a couple of trainers that just don't seem to exist anymore in people's consciousness. But when I was getting into the sport, late teens, early 20s, these guys were synonymous with landing sort of crafty punts in very, very minor races. And it really kind of ignited my interest in the seedier side of the game. So I'll throw this open to you, John, and you, Lee. Two trainers that you might remember, C.J. Hill.
Oh, yeah.
The Barnstable Butcher. And from Newmarket, John, you might remember Ian Campbell.
Oh, God, yeah.
When I first started getting into the sport, Ian Campbell had a little period, I think, in the late 80s, early 90s, where his runners were massively underestimated by the market. And he had horses like Qualitaire Rhythm, Rusty Reel, Soda Popinski, all of whom were set up to land touches in very minor races, dual purpose trainer, etc. And from that time, I made some quite good money following, particularly in Campbell horses. And I think his brother, Ross Campbell, used to ride them, I think. He was no stylist, but they kept it in-house. And they were really smart. As I remember, I think they had quite a prolific and quite successful tipster at the time I think called Bob Rothman. Do you remember him?
Yeah.
He owned quite a few horses in that yard, obviously following some success. Oh yeah, we put some horses in, and then that's when it started to go wrong because they were setting these horses up for punts, and I think the pressure was on Ian Campbell to deliver, and their kind of strike rates diminished, and he was never the same after that. But Ian Campbell, that yard that got me interested in racing, and as regards Colin Hill, I think he was almost just the name. I think Tony Newcombe was doing his horses at the time. That's what I heard. But they were deadly in sort of minor races, sort of around Chepstow, etc. Very, very tight-lipped outfit. And he used to train just outside of Barnstable. And I think he was called the Barnstable Butcher. Now, whether he was a butcher by trade or whether that was a sort of a pen name for him.
I might be wrong, Chris. Didn't he have a sort of Harrowich horse at one point?
He had Captain Morgan, won the Brown Jack or something. I think he had one really good horse. I think
it was a stare, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was Summit Morgan. I don't know if it was Captain Morgan, etc. That was his kind of one decent horse. It's
Morgan's Choice, was it?
Morgan's Choice, you're right. Captain Morgan is what I ought to be drinking now. But
memory lane.
just to continue the theme, you'll remember him. He gave up not too long ago. Was Willie Musson.
Oh, yeah.
Shrewd nut, and I had some dealings with him very briefly. He had a brother that was not very well in a care home, and like the bastard government was selling all the assets in the house to pay for this man's long-term care. Through a man who knew a man who knew a man, I was able to put him in touch with somebody that was an expert in NHS continuing care that could advocate for him to try and get the NHS to step in. So I managed to do this successfully, and he said, "What do you want for it?" I said, no, it's fine, it's fine. He said, "Well, look, you've helped me out. What do you want?" I said, "Tell me a fucking winner." And of course, Willie Musson went, "Oh, you've done a good bit of work. Tell me a winner." He said, "All right, I'll tell you a winner." Weeks and weeks went past, never heard anything from him. And then one day at sort of 11:30, I can't even remember the horse, he rang me up. He said, "Oh, it's Willie here." I said, "Well, hello, how you doing? How's your brother?" "Oh, yes, much better, thanks. You might want to have a few pounds on this." Get the name of the horse. It was about 6-7 to 1 in some Southall race. And I thought, well, fuck me, got to go head down on this. Backed it. I think it finished 5-2 and absolutely pissed up. I thought, well, the guy was good for his word. And that to me meant more than a couple of £100 worth of fees in time. He was sound as a pound. And I got chatting to him in the meantime not about racing, etc. But he said he never used to have a bet until midday. So he said, if you ever see money for my horses overnight or early, he said, it's not ours. Right? He said, absolutely not ours. He said, I do not bet. And I do not tell the owners to bet until after 11 o'clock to the market settled down. Just a really shrewd, quite a dry old stick. But this one, he just told me, this will win. And it fucking did win. That was it. And that meant more to me than sort of, so, can drop us £100 from a time, because it was worth, and he was good for his words. Willie Musson, Ian Campbell and Colin Hill were the three.
One Pat Edry, didn't he, Musson?
He had Rita's Choice, didn't he? Was that good sprinter that they had? Yeah, that used to win when wanted. And he's a really, just a smart outfit. And I think Henry Spiller took over his yard when he retired, etc. Because he was quite old when I knew him. Time. Yeah, real shrewd operator, just a fashion gambling trainer, I think you'd call him now.
Yeah, Willie Musson fooled me into buying Artisan off him.
Did he? Oh, God.
Which was Red Caddo's half-brother. And yeah, he was shit.
Cheating old bastard, yeah. Fuck him, yeah. Talk about other people, and obviously, sadly, no longer with us, Dandy Nichols. Well, for a short period of time, I gave a bit of advice to him about setting up a little racing club with his partner, etc. Doing a little bit of work for him. And I thought, hang on a minute, what am I doing here? I'm spending a load of time, right, helping him with do Facebook, and you need to do a news. I write a little newsletter for him, etc. I'm getting nothing out of this. I mean, literally nothing. No tips, fuck all. So I rang Dandy Nichols up and I said, "Hey, I'm doing your racing." "Oh, thanks very much. Yeah, amazing. Yeah, doing great work." I said, "Well, what the fuck am I getting out of it? You got sort of 200 members, etc. I want a winner." "Oh, no," he said, "it don't work like that." I said, "It fucking does work like that." I said, "Because if you want me to continue writing newsletters for you, I need to get something out of it." So he got a bit funny about it. I said, "Listen, mate," I said, "I'm going to put my pen down." I said, "You write your own now." He said, "I can't fucking write anything." I said, "Well, then you better tell me some." And to be fair to him, he got someone else to run it in the end once he got rocking and rolling. He rang me up 3 times and he gave me 3 winners. And it weren't mega prices, sort of 5-2, 3-1, but it was like, yeah, you can go and have what you want on this. And it was over a period of sort of 4 or 5 months, so it wasn't all the time. But fair play to him, he did deliver when a little bit of a pressure was applied. He was good as gold in that respect.
Dandy Nichols, he'll appear later on this show with one of my famous gambles. He was also known as the Sprint King as a trainer. Right, mentioning Stuart Williams, friend of the show, was on last week's podcast regarding the state of the game, and Stuart's always a good sport. But also, Stuart Williams, in his own right, is probably one of the masters of his craft, because this lad trains lots of winners and mega gambled on winners. Tom Morley in the yard, Patrick Veach in the yard. These lads don't miss. In fact, one bookmaker, Albion Racing, special mention for you tonight, Tucker Noyce. He made a famous quote about Stuart Williams. He says, these lads, they'll take all the money out of your satchel and they'll take your lunch money as well.
Yes.
Take your fucking satchel.
The lot. They'll leave you with nothing. So Stuart Williams, master of his craft, going back to one of the most famous gambles, obviously the mastermind, and probably one of the best modern brains we've had in the sport, Patrick Veach, Exponential at Nottingham, was bought for 27,000 guineas by Veach at the sales. Obviously, hidden name. Veach was nowhere near the old earning name. Finished last on his stable debut. But John, where to get a horse well beat on your stable debut? A Northern Track. Where would you do it, Eldo?
I'd probably chance my arm at Beverley.
You'd be spot on. That's exactly where it was. So last at Beverley, 13 of 13 at Beverley, buried blinkers and an eye shield, John, that day.
Oh dear.
Couldn't even see.
Carrying about £5 extra on its head then. Every plate's a good bucket of feed.
So next time out, it turns up in, it wouldn't have been a top class Nottingham maiden, but you probably have to run to 75, 80 to win it. And obviously showing no form, Stuart Williams, they're all thinking, yeah, this will be spun up. 100 to 1 it opened up on course. 179 on Betfair, was backed into 8 to 1 on course. And needless to say, it did the business. And it's one of the biggest gambles of the modern era. It took around £500,000 out for good old Patrick and connections. I would say this warrants it on the list as one of the greatest plots that's probably ever done. And that's the beauty of like loose lips sink ships, John.
Oh, absolutely.
And this is the thing about Stuart Williams, because obviously Stuart Williams will have known about this. He knows what the horse can run to. So the fact Stuart Williams must be 150% trustworthy if you have a horse with him.
Couldn't be anything other, could he? I mean, the proof is in the opening price.
Yeah, because if Stuart Williams tells anyone, or even tells his missus, who then tells her dad, and her dad tells all his mates in Boozer, all of a sudden it's opening up 28s or 23s, or that's the thing. It's all about just keeping it so tight-lipped. That's why I'm passing massive credit, not to Patrick Veach, because all he does is buy the horse, ask Stuart what it can do. I'm giving the credit to this gamble to friend of the show, Stuart Williams, because this is a guy that could have spoilt that price by just mentioning it to one person. That could have been it. That's how I stand on that. One of the greatest gambles, or price gambles, I think that's took place in the modern era, Exponential. John, I'm going to move to you. I think you need to speak now. I want to know about Green God, John.
Right. Well, we need to go back to 1971.
Yeah. Great year. I wasn't born.
For Green God. This horse was owned by David Robinson, who Radio Rentals. You hear it.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, Philip Robinson was a relative of the jockey.
Wasn't Bill Holden involved with them at some point?
Yeah. Anyway, cut a long story slightly shorter. At the time, John Magnier was trying to make a bit of impact as a stallion master, and he was coming off the back of a spectacular failure where he tried to put a syndicate together to buy Nijinsky, believe it or not. He got one or two investors a bit jiggy, but the overall feeling was, well, we don't have stallions in this part of the world. When they finish racing, they all go back to America. But Magnier already had this idea in mind where we retain the stallions over here, stop them going back to America, and it works out better for breeders in general if you've got the stallions here, and if you get a decent band of broodmares, you're on the gravy train. That was his plan. So he'd failed to buy Nijinsky. His next project was It's kind of a recurring theme with Magna. He does like a bit of what you call cheap speed. He likes hardy horses that show plenty of toe. And this Green God was pretty much on course to be champion sprinter in 71. And he's trying to put this syndicate together to buy it. It's got one more run. Robinson stipulated it had to run in the Vernons before he'd finalise the sale. Leicester was riding it, and of course, Magna was courting O'Brien's daughter, and Leicester had got word to him that the horse was on the verge of going over the top. If Magna paid what he was agreeing to pay for it, if this horse was over the top and ran a stinker in the Vernons, chances are he'd lose some investors and all sorts. And he was a little bit short of the money going into the race. He'd shared his woes with Lester Piggott, who said, well, why don't you work it then?
John, do a proper impression.
Yeah, well, work it then. Magda's decided to go for the jackpot with this and make up the difference. Then Lester says to him, well, he said, yes, I'm wrecked it, you know. And he said, well, no, I won't be around till last minute. Fields rumbling into the final furlong, no sign of Leicester, and then he threads his way through, drops its head in front right on the jam stick, comes in, gets off the horse, he says, well, that started him off because Green God had full books for his first 2 years. Magna starts on the gravy train. The investors he got interested at that stage. Plus, on Vernon's Day, he'd met the sponsor's son, R.V. Sangster, who agreed to front the syndicate that put together in 1975 to start buying baby stallions at Caneland.
Wow.
And that's where it all started.
Wow, Chris, we write articles on luck.
Yep.
So a young John Magnier was 23 then.
Yep.
If that girl's tits up and Leicester's put him away.
Yeah.
What would give the shape of the game now?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
He may well have flourished completely another industry. That's how life can change on the turn of a card.
He was the type of bloke to flourish at whatever he was doing. Because, I mean, you talk about visionaries. Nobody was buying retired racehorses to stand in this country in 1971.
No.
And he's gone to try and buy Nijinsky, for fuck's sake.
That'd be extraordinary. He would have been a multi-gazillionaire in practically any industry. He's a unique character. With British racing needs someone like that, a real visionary.
Yeah.
And
20 steps ahead all the time.
At 23 years old, though, John. Imagine most 23-year-olds now.
Well, you just want the selfie stick out and tell them the selfie out in one up, don't they?
Yeah, or any of us then. I agree. Yeah, extraordinary guy, but imagine, as Lee said, if that hadn't have copped, you may not have heard of him.
May not.
He may have found another opportunity, but history could have taken a different course, and that's about luck, isn't it? How your life can turn on a card sometimes.
So there you go. Great story from John, as always, on Green God. Again, educating myself, and as well as hopefully a few of you out there that have not heard that story. We come back to Curley before we go to the final two stories. And obviously, this was probably one of the greatest ever gambles in terms of organised odds. So, Barney Curley, 22nd of January 2014. He had a horse multi, Eye of the Tiger, Low Key, Seven Summits, and Indus Valley. The overnight odds of those four winning were a combined 13,000 to 1. Now that's some coup. The first winner, let's talk about Eye of the Tiger, trained by Des Donovan.
Who I knew really well, actually. I'll come in at the end of your story because I knew him quite well for a couple of years.
Good stuff. Yeah, I'd love your input on this, Chris. That was 10 to 1 into even, off the track for 481 days. Upon acquiring Eye of the Tiger, Donovan said he's had very bad problems and he won't run under a penalty. I used to work for Mr. Curley and I'm in his yard. No one wanted to buy him and he said, do what you can with him. That was the first one, and obviously absolutely pissed up. The second one was a horse called Seven Summits, trained by Sophie Leach, the Leach team. 7 to 1 into 9 to 4-5. This was with finger curls, previously trained by Curley. 671-day break between move from Curley to Leach. Then 3 runs, 9th of 10, 11th of 14, and 3rd from 12 with a total beaten distance of 81.5 lengths. Christian Leach, who's been on Twitter recently with his virtue, he's bandaged in exercise, and when he's in his stables, we just have to mind him very carefully. That's why he's got so few miles on the clock. Just fantastic. So that's number 2. Indus Valley, trained by Des Donovan.
Yes.
I'm waiting for Chris at the end. So 20-1 into 4-6. Off track for 700 days. Previous runs for Donovan, 11th of 14, 10th of 11, 10th of 11, 13th of 13, with a total beaten distance of 83 lengths. Trainer said regarding apparent improvement in form that the gelding had been trained on its own following a year's break, as it was known to be a hard puller previously and was better being suited by a drop to 6 furlongs. Okay, the last winner, low key, John Butler. 7-1 into 4-7. Indian John, as he's known now. Previous 4 runs for Butler. 5th of 6, 4th of 5, 7th of 8, 7th of 7, with a total beaten distance of 128 lengths. Off the track for 350 days and gelded since its last run. Trainer said regarding apparent improvement in form that it had been gelded since its last run and had benefited from the drop in class.
Good.
Paddy Power described it as one of the blackest days in bookmaker history, costing the industry £18.3 million, with the coup itself netting Curley an estimated £2 million. Right, Chris, you're busting to talk on Des Donovan.
Not bust. I did have a few legs in bits of horses with Des when he first kind of started, because he used to do a lot of the horses for Barney Curley, and he told me all the things that we already know about Barney Curley, is that you wouldn't know quite what the plan was with any horse really in that yard, because it was run like such a tight ship. But he did say is that if you ever see Curley horses that hadn't run for 3 years and the assumption was, oh, it had a leg problem, he said invariably there was absolutely nothing wrong with any of those horses. But Curley used to have a plan for a horse. He said often 2 seasons in advance of where you are now, even though the program book hadn't been mapped out. In his mind, he had this horse I'm going to set up for a cellar at Folkestone in 2 years' time. Now, it sounds mad. You think, well, how can you plan when the program book isn't framed? He said, but that's the kind of visionary that Curley had for the sport. And I don't think he's a genius, because I think that word's overused, as we know, John. But certainly a visionary in that sense. He had a gift and a sense for where he wanted those horses to run. But what can I tell you about Des? He liked to fight, all right? He was always fighting on a Friday night, and he was invariably drunk. And I used to struggle to try and decipher what he was telling me through his sort of, very kind of heavy Irish accent and alcohol. And he used to ring my mum's house at sort of 2 a.m, and she used to faithfully kind of record on a bit of paper the message. And it was invariably things like, tell Chris, hey, fucking, that fucking horse, hey, fucking, we'll be fucking all right. And she used to write this down. She said, I think I may have missed out a fucking, but he said that, and it was literally, hey, fucking, we'll have a few quid out that fucking horse. But you can never get what that fucking horse was. And he used to read, hey, did you fucking back it? I said, back what? The fucking horse. You never mentioned the name. Oh, fuck it. Did I not? No, you didn't tell her what the name of the horse was. Oh, fuck it. It was literally like this. So he was quite a comical character, but I think he went back to Ireland train. I think he's come back now to the UK, but a very nice guy. He's probably mellowed, but I have to say I really had no idea what he was on about most of the time, but I enjoyed my time with him anyway.
That is superb, Chris.
Hey, fucking, make sure you're fucking. What's a fucking? And my mum, who's quite posh, she said, oh, yes, thank you very much for your call, Mr. Donovan, at 2 a.m. He's like fucking ringing her up, hey, fucking, hey, tell him fucking, we'll get a few fucking quid. She said, does this make sense to you? I said, not much. She said, well, I think I've got it down exactly what he said. So there you go.
Brilliant. Right, that's why Barney Curley used to trust him.
Yeah.
Because he was too drunk to tell anyone to name a horse. Jonas, is this the greatest coup of all time? It is, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
I think it's a masterclass in readying 4 horses that have just got plenty in hand.
That's it. I mean, how many people look beyond getting one ready?
Oh, no. To plan that and get the day right, get the trips right, get the everything right, and still have enough price and mileage on the day as well. Because even though, like, they did shorten on the off, like when everyone had got wind, I think on the morning, you could still back them at relatively decent prices. The SPs were short, but I remember the morning prices. If you still wanted to do the look at, it were nice. You were getting some decent odds. I'm not saying they were massive, but they weren't anywhere near the SPs. And it was like, yeah, it's there for everyone to have a go, because these were the days when bookies didn't necessarily just cancel you for backing a winner. Fabulous, fabulous touch from Barney, who, RIP, was probably the master of doing so. Very bent, but that's that's what it was. I'm going to come up next before going to John for the finale. John's got a finale one that is pretty good. Yeah, it's a brilliant one that you've unlikely to have heard of. So I'll go before John. And this is another weird tale and a sad tale also. We go back to 13th of June, the Saturday, 1992, to Sandown for a horse called Father Hayes, trained by William Pearce. Now, William Pearce was a trainer that come on the scene. He purchased Ambleton House Stable.
Best dressed trainer in the north.
For $2.25 million in 1989. The likes of Noel Merlis training there, etc. Very famous training establishment. Father Hayes was a bit of a weird one because it was very cloak and dagger. This horse was named various names prior to even running. They had something like 2 or 3 name changes. It was called Dashing John at one point before it had ran. For example, the Timeform racehorses of 1990 had it down as a bay before it ever ran, and it was a chestnut. And there was lots of problems regarding its paperwork. It was bought from Keeneland, but it didn't really identify that it was the horse it was. And David Nicholson, the Duke, backed out of buying this horse from Irish Republican landlord Tony Gleeson on the back of it's not got the proper paperwork. So he just said, this looks really dodgy. So anyway, Father Hayes, the horse, ended up with William Pearce, and it was ridden by Dandy Nichols in its not-offs. And on D-Day, it was back from 20-1 into 3-1 in the morning of the race. It was live on Channel 4, drifted from 7-2 to 11-2 before massive support on the off, with Big Mac getting excited live on Channel 4, going bananas that the cash is coming in for the officers this. And it took a lot of money to move the markets back then at Sandown. Not like the books now that just look on Betfair and shorten them. You had to shove lots of cash on a Saturday meeting at Sandown to knock it in. And knock it in they did back into 4-1. Of course, the horse won. Had won easily. Dandy Nichols was seen at the line punching the air like he just won the derby in a 0-75 handicap. And of course, when you do more research into the original owner of the horse, Tony Gleeson, this was the same Irish Republican that landed a big punt on Rotherfield Greys to win the 88 Stewards Cup, John.
Aye.
It was interesting, though, that Tony Gleeson didn't earn it on D-Day. Of course he didn't. It was owned by Will Pearce's brother, Rodney.
Yes.
You'd like the old dude.
Yes, keep it in the family.
So apparently £500,000, which in 92 was a good amount, was taken out with the officers in the ring, and they had it right off. But the excuses were really funny to me. Pearce went in after to the stewards and said, yeah, he hated Beverley, which a lot do, to be fair. But he said he hated the Southall fibre sand surface. So this is where I class like Jockey Club and BHA as useless. When Mary Reevely got the horse down the line, ran 3 times at Southall since and finished second, first and first. But again, that's what you get with stewards. But besides that, there's a tragic tale to the story because the weird thing was, after all this, despite Pearce saying he'd won nothing and didn't bet, you love that, Chris.
Yes.
I didn't bet.
Yes.
I
don't know where the money came from.
Sadly, a few days later, he was found dead, having shot himself, apparently due to a visit from the tax inspector. Tax inspections back then, it's like Piggott did time.
He did.
I think Lester was on the verge of doing a stretch at that time, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I reckon he thought, I'm not doing that. I'm not going in prison for 2 years. And he shot himself. So it's quite a sad tale in the end, but definitely one where the documentation was certainly circumspect, and who knows what horse turned up that day. We don't know.
But it won, though, didn't it? I remember seeing that in the betting shop live, and every punters was even remarked of Dandy Nichols punching the air as he crossed the line. I mean, even Joe Punter could say. Funny enough about sort of tax and customs, but they're not immune from having a bet themselves. When Brian Wright Remember the milkman, all the Graham Bradley thing? When his penthouse in Chelsea was raided, customs went in there and they bagged everything up. And he had a telephone answering machine, all right? The message was bleeping. So rather than sort of bag it up, they pressed play. And one of the messages on there was from Pat Iddery. And it said, Brian, you've got to be on this horse today. Here's the name of the horse. This will fucking win, right? This will piss up. Go and have your max bet on it. So the customs officers are looking, I think, fuck me, hang on a minute, looked at the paper, fucking hell, it's today. It's running today. So they piled in and the horse is tailed off. But what the silly buggers didn't realise is the message was from 2 weeks previously when the horse bolted up at 4-1. So they thought they had a bit of information, but actually failed to check the date. And just coincidentally, the horse was running on the day, got raided and finished tailed off. So if we get information, always double check that it's, today's the day. And that's absolutely true, because I know one of the fellas that rang me up and said, God, you're nuts. Pat Iddery's left a message. I fucking have what you want on. And I looked at the form. I thought, hang on a minute. It won the week before. Are you sure it's not? Oh, no. Fucking idiot. That's almost as bad as me getting told one by Kevin Bradshaw and backing the wrong one on the Sun that day. The only winner I think he's ever ridden in his life. I backed one of the many non-tries he rode. You've got to have luck on your side, haven't you?
You have. Superb, Chris, as always, from you. To finish this show off in style, we're going to, John, because this is good. This is a story, John, that you've got for us about Henry Rawdon-Hastings, 4th Marquess of Hastings.
Henry Waysford Charles Plantagenet Rawdon-Hastings, 4th Marquess of Hastings, even his full title. He had a very brief life, but one that you could say was jam-packed full of excitement.
Yeah.
He was the second son of the 3rd Marquess of Hastings, unsurprisingly, and with him being the 4th.
Yeah.
When he was 9, his elder brother died, so he assumed all the titles and massive wealth to go with it. And you're talking like proper old money, mid-Victorian era wealth, which was like sick. I mean, they could just go and buy villages and things, couldn't they?
Yeah.
Type of thing. But all through his life, he was a bit of a cunt. He couldn't resist the cockfighting, the bear baiting, whatever was going on, he was there. He was a proper lad. Whatever they were doing, he wanted a bigger buzz all the time. And Punch magazine at the time, they always used to write about these society types, and they always used to refer to him as the unhappy lad. He couldn't seem to find anything that stimulated him enough, but he gave it a fucking good go. To start with, his best friend at the time, a bloke called Henry Chaplin, was going to be married to this top society beauty lady, Florence Paget, and the wedding was going to be the event of the year. The Prince of Wales was there offering congrats, all the rest of it. But he got her to call it off. He ended up marrying on the set date himself. You'd expect Chaplin to be an absolute twat about this, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
He'd behave like a total gentleman. The year before Hermit's Derby, 1863, Chaplin had one in the Oaks. Hastings had one that was unbeaten going for the Oaks, but had an injury. But he was so obsessed with beating Chaplin at everything, he insisted this horse of his ran in the Oaks, bet the hell out of it with Chaplin, who took all money for it, because he'd heard that the horse wasn't right. The horse gets beat in the Oaks. Then the cheek of Hastings, he asked Chaplin for time to pay. Then the following year, Chaplin's got the favourite for the Derby, a horse called Hermit. After the Oaks incident, Hastings is more or less obsessed. He's starting to get a bit sick in the head, this fella. So he laid Henry Chaplin's horse, Hermit, to the sum of £120,000, which by 2023 values would be about 15 million quid. Needless to say, Hermit won the Derby. Hastings was absolutely cleaned out. The great family seat had gone, everything had gone. He died aged 26 in 1868. He had no children. The Marquessate of Hastings became extinct. The earldom of Rawdon, which he also held, was passed to his eldest sister, Lady Edith, and his English baronies fell into abeyance. And that was the end of the Hastings line, so to speak. But The poor bastard, he did 15 million in on the derby.
I'm just laughing about this in the short time span. Chris, this is like you, given wealth.
Yeah.
You could write your low life column and said, Ashley Carr's told me this can't get beat, and this bookie's taking you on because he hates you. And it's like, I'll fucking show you. And you said to him, I'll back this to win 15 million. It gets beat. You've done it all in by 26. We amphetamines, coke, hookers, and gone out in a blaze of glory.
And the rest I'd have wasted, as they say. Some people have the ability to hang them to it, and I'm certainly not one of those people. And I think it's like that Michael Carroll. Remember the fella, the bin man that won the lottery?
Yeah.
He built a speedway track in his garden, and you think, he's going to lose it. Because the first thing he did was build a speedway track in his garden. I mean, fucking hell. But he had a nice time, though, didn't he?
Marquess of Hastings, there were some absolute heroes at that time. People that just did not give a fuck.
The aristocracy has got pedigree for that. I mean, even as recently as the 6th Lord Lucan, the wives used to sit on the widow's bench and watch their husbands fritter the family fortune away on baccarat and, Punto Banco and all that. It's in their DNA, isn't it? They just have to knock it out, don't they? Jack Treetop Strauss, the famous poker player, brilliant World Series of Poker man, he knocked his fortune out betting on golf. So he'd go and win like a poker tournament, win $1 million, and for the following day, he'd fucking done it all betting golf. You can be brilliant at one aspect of gambling, but have a weakness for another. And unfortunately, there are very few people that are strong enough just to put a nail in it when you win and forget about it and look after it.
He was probably born a bit too late, the Marquess of Hastings, because if he'd been born 50 or so years earlier, at the Regency times, society would have been fine with it.
Yeah.
But this Victorian morality that was coming in, he was just viewed as a drunken rake gambler.
Well,
I think he'd have fitted in well with today's times, though.
Oh, yeah, today's, yeah.
Reading a bit about him, they all bidded him up in ring to buy yearlings.
Yeah.
They stitched him up just like, let's say, Jamie Osborne does, and all that lot, like raise your hand. Trader John Day suggested a man of his standing was morally bound to have a nice yearling or two. So basically,
morally bound, yeah.
Coincidentally, the arrival of Hastings, the sales ring formed into almost madness, with yearling prices going up massively.
It's funny.
From averages of 450 and 500 guineas to 2,000 and 2,500 guineas.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Even though these people are clearly degenerates, and groups of people that are kind of revered as being masters of their craft, the Druids Lodge Confederacy, that book which is catalogues that secret yard they had on Salisbury Plain where they landed these astronomical punts in the sort of the 1800s. Overall, if you look at someone's done an analysis of their betting accounts, despite all those huge wins of eye-watering sums, overall the exercise only broke even. So yes, they're well known for landing these punts that you couldn't get on these days. For many millions, they still only broke even. And that's a kind of a lesson. So people like Curley, whatever people say about him, and I'm a bit of a critic, to make a huge fortune out of punting and keep it is just extraordinary, because most can win it at something else and lose on another form of punting. Very rare that people hang on to it, as we've seen over the years.
Absolutely. Super sure, chaps. Who are we voting all-time gamble? Has it got to be the Curly Four, do we think?
Gossiping all day long. Fuck. Gossiping. Yeah, no, Curly. I mean, that's in a different league for me.
Yeah. John?
Yeah, you can't look past that team.
No.
That's stupid, isn't it?
No, that wins the gambling of all time. Though I did also like John's Green Godtail regarding Bagnier.
Brilliant.
That's something I didn't know about. And it's a brilliant show, this. Thank you, John and Chris, because Chris, you've also passed on some life experience. No, it's true. It's stuff that people listen to this that haven't known about this. I think it's great stuff. And, of course, keep following the Bar Stewards, keep subscribing to Patreon as you do, and a real pleasure to have you on board. And also, a very good Patreon show that's available now is John's podcast about the stout years. This is a really good listen, and I urge you all to subscribe and listen to that, because honestly, and don't forget, we've got 3-year-olds to follow coming up. That's under the £7 banner. It's not expensive, and you get a wealth of information and
that
everything.
That should be £8, to be fair.
It should. It's that good.
And to plug the edge, guys. I know you're too self-effacing for your own good, but I'll plug that. People who are recreational punters or punters that want to make a little second income, the edge serve is knocking it out the park at the minute. It's just extraordinary stuff. It's very selective. It's advice given after 11 o'clock, so you're not relying on overnight fantasy prices. So if you're miserable and losing money, give the edge service a go, but do it for a few months because, there are ups and downs, but you won't find better. And, I can say that honestly and objectively. I've tried everybody, as Lee knows, and the edge service is far and away the most consistent betting service I've ever encountered.
Thank you very much for kind words, and we hope you've enjoyed this show. We certainly have. That's all from us. Bye for now.